Have you ever felt drained after a family gathering, as though you're giving more than you're receiving, but unsure how to change that? It's a struggle many men face. The expectations, the guilt, the unspoken rules that weigh us down, especially when it comes to toxic family dynamics. We're expected to remain stoic, keep our emotions in check, and simply deal with it. But when does it all become too much? Here's the truth. Family can be a source of strength, or it can be a place that holds us back. Toxic family relationships, those marked by manipulation, guilt trips, and emotional abuse, can leave lasting scars. But the question is, do you accept it, or do you stand up for yourself? In today's video, we're diving deep into the intersection of Stoicism and family relationships. We'll explore how Stoic philosophy can guide you through the storm of toxic family dynamics. It's not about cutting ties for the sake of cutting ties. It's about setting boundaries that protect your peace and emotional well-being. The Stoics believed in controlling what we can, our responses, our actions, and letting go of what we cannot change. Before we dive in, if you're ready to break free from unhealthy family patterns and reclaim your inner strength, hit that like button, subscribe to Stoic Narratives Official, and let's begin this journey together. You'll want to stay with us until the end, as we'll be sharing actionable steps to help you create lasting change in your family relationships. Number 1. Turning guilt into growth, overcoming the fear of cutting ties with family. For many people, the thought of cutting ties with a family member can stir up an overwhelming sense of guilt. The idea feels unnatural. After all, family is supposed to be our haven, right? But what if, instead of providing support and love, these relationships are causing more harm than good? What if they're draining your energy, leaving you emotionally exhausted, or holding you back from your true potential? This is a challenge many face, especially when family members cross boundaries or engage in toxic behavior. A man, for example, found himself constantly torn between his desire to live a peaceful life and the pressure from his family to always put their needs above his own. Despite his growing discomfort, he continued to make sacrifices, feeling like he couldn't walk away without feeling guilty. The more he sacrificed, the worse he felt, both emotionally and mentally. The constant tug of guilt kept him tethered to the same unhealthy cycle. But here's where Stoic philosophy can make a significant difference. The Stoics teach us that we cannot control the actions of others, but we can control our responses. They also remind us that our value doesn't depend on others' approval. A key lesson in Stoicism is to focus on what we can change, our actions, beliefs, and emotional responses, while accepting what we cannot control, including the behavior of others. As Marcus Aurelius famously wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." When you recognize that you are not obligated to control the behavior of others, you free yourself to focus on your actions and mental peace. For instance, Marcus Aurelius, one of the most revered Stoic philosophers, understood that people act according to their nature. In his writings, he emphasized that while we may not be able to change the behavior of others, we can choose how we respond to them. If a family member's behavior is toxic, it is not wrong to set boundaries, even if it feels uncomfortable. Setting boundaries is not about cutting someone off out of anger or malice, but about protecting your well-being. Guilt arises from a fear of judgment and an internalized belief that family members should always come first, no matter the cost to your mental health. But the Stoic principle of virtue tells us that maintaining our integrity and emotional peace should be the priority, even if that means taking a difficult but necessary step. As Epictetus wisely said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Consider the case of a woman who found herself in a similar situation. For years, she had been caught in a cycle of trying to please her family, even when their demands went against her values. It wasn't until she embraced the idea of setting boundaries, rooted in Stoic thought, that she began to regain control over her life. The guilt didn't vanish overnight, but she learned to face it with a sense of strength, rather than letting it consume her. She realized that by cutting ties with toxic influences, she was taking a step toward a better, healthier life. By applying Stoic principles, you shift your focus from the negative emotions associated with cutting ties to the empowerment that comes with living authentically. The key is understanding that family relationships, just like any other, must be built on mutual respect and trust. If these elements are missing, it might be time to reevaluate the relationship, regardless of the emotional difficulty involved. The Stoic idea of equanimity, maintaining mental calmness in the face of adversity, can help you approach these situations with clarity and a sense of peace. As Seneca once advised, "He who is brave is free." It is through the act of being brave and setting boundaries that we truly reclaim our freedom and inner peace. It's important to remember that cutting ties doesn't necessarily mean severing the relationship permanently. It can be about creating space, setting clear boundaries, and taking the necessary time to heal. Often the most difficult part of this process is the fear of the consequences, the backlash, the judgment, or the guilt. But when you take a step back and examine your motivations, the fear starts to diminish. You begin to realize that the only thing truly at stake is your peace of mind. As you reflect on this, ask yourself, what is more important? Maintaining unhealthy ties that drain your energy, or creating space for growth and self-care, even if it means disappointing others? What kind of family dynamic would you rather cultivate? One that brings peace, or one that keeps you stuck in toxic patterns? By taking control of your emotional responses and recognizing that you have the right to prioritize your mental and emotional well-being, you begin the journey towards self-liberation. Stoicism teaches us that we don't need to live by the expectations of others. We live by the standards we set for ourselves. So when family ties become burdensome, remember that cutting those ties is not a weakness, but an act of strength, one that allows you to grow and live with greater peace. Reflect on this in your own life. Are there relationships, perhaps with family members, that have become too toxic to continue as they are? What steps could you take today to start reclaiming your peace and emotional freedom? Number 2, confronting manipulation, recognizing and responding to toxic behavior. Confronting manipulation in relationships is one of the most challenging yet crucial steps towards self-liberation. Recognizing toxic behavior and responding appropriately can make the difference between maintaining a healthy emotional state and sinking into an exhausting cycle of emotional manipulation. But how do we identify when we're being manipulated? And more importantly, how do we respond? Consider a woman who, for years, has been at the mercy of a family member who always demands more than they offer in return. Despite her repeated attempts to communicate her needs, this family member always manages to twist the situation, making her feel as though she's being unreasonable. "You're just being too sensitive," they say, every time she expresses discomfort. Over time, she begins to question herself, doubting her feelings and her worth. This is manipulation in its subtle form, emotional manipulation. Recognizing manipulation is the first step in taking control of the situation. Manipulators often deploy a variety of tactics to keep their victims under their control. These tactics can range from gaslighting, where the manipulator causes you to doubt your perception of reality, to guilt tripping, where they use your empathy and sense of responsibility against you. A manipulative person might twist your words, make you feel like you're the problem, or even use your past actions to justify your own poor behavior. The Stoics had a powerful perspective on handling manipulation. They emphasized the importance of maintaining emotional self-control and focusing on what we can control, our responses. In situations where manipulation occurs, it's vital to remember that you control how you respond, not how others behave. The key Stoic practice here is recognizing your emotions, but not letting them control your actions. One of the first signs of manipulation is when you start feeling like you're constantly on the defensive. You might feel like you're walking on eggshells, always trying to avoid conflict or disappointment. When this happens, it's important to pause and reflect. Why am I feeling this way? Is this person making unreasonable demands? Are they consistently disregarding my needs and feelings? If the answer is yes, it's time to take action. Manipulative people thrive on a lack of boundaries. They know that if they can keep you in a state of uncertainty or guilt, you'll be more likely to comply with their requests. They often say things like, "If you cared about me, you would do this," or "You know how much I've done for you." These statements are designed to provoke guilt and create a sense of obligation. However, the Stoics believed that our obligation should be to act with virtue, not to appease others at the expense of our well-being. A man who always agreed to his friends' requests, no matter how inconvenient, reached a breaking point when he realized he was sacrificing his happiness and peace of mind to keep the peace. Over time, he found that his friend's behavior was not a sign of care, but of self-interest. He had been manipulated into putting his friend's needs before his own. Upon recognizing this, he took a step back and asked himself, "Is this how I want to live?" This question is a hallmark of Stoic reflection. It challenges us to consider the bigger picture and prioritize our integrity and well-being. Once you've identified manipulation, responding effectively is key. Stoicism teaches us to approach difficult situations with calmness and reason. When you confront a manipulative person, it's important to remain firm and clear about your boundaries. It might feel uncomfortable at first, but as you assert yourself, you'll likely notice a sense of relief and empowerment. A woman who had long struggled with a manipulative colleague found herself trapped in a cycle of constant overwork, feeling unable to say no. She realized that by saying yes all the time, she was neglecting her own needs. When she finally practiced saying no with kindness but firmness, she not only regained control over her time, but her self-respect as well. So, how do you begin setting these boundaries? Start by acknowledging that you have the right to protect your emotional energy. Practice saying no without guilt. You don't need to explain yourself in great detail or justify your decisions. A simple, "I cannot do that right now," or "That's not something I'm willing to take on," is enough. The key is consistency. Manipulative people often test your boundaries to see how much they can push. But by maintaining a firm stance, you send the message that you're not easily swayed. As the Stoics would advise, remind yourself that your worth is not determined by how much you can give to others, but by your ability to live according to your values. Take a moment to ask yourself, are you prioritizing your well-being, or are you sacrificing it for the sake of others? Are you letting someone else's actions dictate your emotional state, or are you taking control of how you feel and respond? It's natural to feel guilty when you begin to set boundaries, especially with family or close friends. But guilt is often a signal that we're going against an ingrained belief, like the belief that we must always put others first. But think about it. If you're constantly accommodating someone else's needs at the expense of your own, what message are you sending about your self-worth? The Stoics would remind us that we must act in alignment with our values, not to become subservient to the needs of others. In the end, confronting manipulation requires a mixture of self-awareness, boundary setting, and the courage to prioritize your emotional well-being. The Stoic approach teaches us that we are not powerless in these situations. We always can control how we respond, and with that control comes the strength to face even the most toxic relationships with resilience and grace. So I ask you to reflect on this. In what areas of your life are you allowing manipulation or toxic behavior to persist? How might your life improve if you started to assert your boundaries with confidence and clarity? Number 3, breaking the silence. Why men struggle to address toxic family dynamics. It's a scenario that many men face but rarely talk about toxic family dynamics. Whether it's a parent who constantly undermines them, a sibling who never respects boundaries, or a relative who only reaches out when they need something, the strain on emotional health can be overwhelming. Yet, many men find it difficult to address these toxic relationships. Why? Imagine a man who has always tried to make his father proud. No matter how hard he worked and how many sacrifices he made, it always seemed like his father's expectations were just out of reach. Over time, he became accustomed to dismissing his own needs, avoiding confrontation, and keeping the peace, even when it meant suppressing his emotions. This man, like so many others, faced an inner conflict, the desire for a healthy relationship versus the fear of further rejection or conflict. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus reminds us that it is not things themselves that disturb us, but our opinions about them. This man's belief that his worth is tied to meeting his father's expectations is what causes his suffering, not the father's actions themselves. To move past this, he must confront the source of his emotional distress and challenge the deeply ingrained belief that his self-worth hinges on his father's approval. What makes it so hard for men to confront toxic dynamics in their families? For many, it's rooted in a deeply ingrained sense of duty. Men, particularly in certain cultural contexts, are often raised with the belief that their role is to provide and protect, not to confront or challenge family dynamics. In the process, emotional needs and mental well-being take a backseat. This can create a cycle of unspoken tension where everyone tiptoes around difficult issues but never addresses them. Men are also conditioned to believe that vulnerability equals weakness. Confronting toxic family members requires vulnerability, opening up about feelings of hurt, frustration, and disappointment. For many men, this feels like an affront to their masculinity. How many times have you heard someone say, "Men don't cry," or "real men don't talk about their feelings"? These outdated notions not only perpetuate harmful stereotypes, but also hinder emotional healing and growth. The Stoics taught us that the greater the difficulty, the more glory in surmounting it. Confronting family toxicity requires tremendous courage, but through this confrontation we not only heal, but also grow in strength and character. Men who break through the societal expectation of stoic silence model true strength by addressing the discomfort, not by avoiding it. But here's the thing. Avoiding these difficult conversations doesn't eliminate the problem. It only perpetuates it. The longer a man stays silent about toxic behavior, the more it festers beneath the surface. The Stoics were wise in advising us to confront uncomfortable truths rather than avoid them. They believed that we should face challenges directly and honestly without hiding behind false facades. In their view, self-respect and emotional resilience come from acknowledging our struggles and working through them. The silence often comes from fear of rejection, fear of being misunderstood, or fear of damaging a relationship. But if we avoid addressing toxic dynamics, we miss the opportunity for growth, healing, and possibly even repair. Take a man who has spent years tolerating his mother's constant criticism. He loves her, but every interaction feels like walking through a minefield. His fear of confronting her has made him mute to his own needs and desires. Only when he finally speaks up and sets boundaries does he begin to heal, not just the relationship, but also himself. As Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." When a man finally sets boundaries, it is an act of reclaiming control over his emotional well-being. Though the initial confrontation may be uncomfortable, it brings the opportunity to reshape the relationship in a healthier direction. The truth is that silence isn't always golden. It can be a mask, hiding unresolved pain and resentment. But why do men feel the need to keep this mask on? Often it's because they've been socialized to put others' needs before their own, to avoid creating conflict, and to suppress their own feelings for the sake of family harmony. But let's be real. Family harmony built on silent suffering isn't true harmony. True peace comes from mutual understanding and respect, not avoidance. What happens when a man finally decides to speak up? Sometimes the reaction is not what he expects. A family member might be defensive, dismissive, or even angry. However, in the end, the act of setting boundaries and confronting toxic behaviors shows emotional strength. The Stoics remind us that it's better to endure the discomfort of honest communication than to remain in the prison of silence, where resentment slowly poisons the soul. As Seneca wisely put it, it is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. By avoiding uncomfortable conversations with toxic family members, men waste precious time and energy on unresolved issues. It's crucial to engage, not just for the sake of the relationship, but for personal peace. You might wonder, what if I don't want to rock the boat? What if speaking up only makes things worse? Here's the thing, the boat is already rocked. You just haven't noticed it yet, because the waves of tension have been building for so long. Speaking up isn't about causing chaos. It's about addressing what has been ignored for too long. It's about saying, I matter too, and I deserve respect. In fact, silence often fuels the very toxicity we're trying to avoid. Think about it. When we stay silent, we allow toxic patterns to continue unchecked. And those patterns don't just hurt us, they hurt the entire family dynamic. When a man decides to speak out, he does more than just set a boundary. He sets an example for others to follow. He shows that it's okay to have tough conversations, to challenge the status quo, and to demand respect. And while the road to reconciliation may not always be smooth, the alternative, living in a constant state of silent frustration, is far worse. So what does this all mean for you? Have you been avoiding a difficult conversation with a family member, convinced that silence is the easier route? Ask yourself, what is the cost of this silence? What might happen if you decided to speak up, even if it's uncomfortable? Could addressing the toxic dynamics in your life lead to greater peace, not just for you, but for your family as well? As you reflect on this, consider the Stoic lesson. We can't control how others react, but we can control how we respond. By confronting toxic behaviors with courage and honesty, we not only reclaim our emotional health, but also model strength for those around us. And remember, it's not about being perfect in these conversations, it's about having the courage to start them. How long are you willing to stay silent in the face of toxicity? Wouldn't it be worth it to break the silence, set your boundaries, and finally start living authentically? Number 4. Redefining legacy, breaking the cycle for future generations. When we think about legacy, many of us picture grand achievements or memorable acts that leave an indelible mark on history. But legacy isn't just about what we accomplish in the world. It's about the emotional, psychological, and relational patterns we pass down to the next generation. Whether we realize it or not, every family carries forward certain legacies, both positive and negative. These inherited patterns shape who we are and how we interact with others. The question is, what kind of legacy are we creating for our children, and how can we break the cycles of dysfunction that have been passed down? Consider a man who grew up in a household where emotional expression was frowned upon. His father was distant and rarely shared his feelings, and his mother, though loving, never encouraged open dialogue about personal struggles. As an adult, this man finds himself mimicking these behaviors in his own family. He loves his children but struggles to connect with them emotionally. He feels disconnected from his wife, unable to express his frustrations or needs, much like the silent role models he grew up with. This is a common scenario for many people, carrying the unspoken burden of a toxic family legacy without realizing it. But can this cycle be broken? The Stoic philosophers often emphasize the importance of self-awareness and self-improvement. They believed that individuals have the power to shape their lives and destinies, regardless of their past. In their view, our legacies are not set in stone, they are shaped by the choices we make. This is where the concept of breaking cycles becomes crucial. If we want to create a healthier environment for future generations, we need to actively challenge and reframe the negative patterns we've inherited. This is not an easy task, but it's a vital one. Why is it so difficult to break the cycle? For many, it's because these patterns are deeply ingrained in our subconscious. Our upbringing has shaped how we view ourselves and others, and often these views are reinforced by society. A man who witnessed constant conflict between his parents may subconsciously assume that all relationships are built on tension. A woman who was told not to speak up or make waves may grow up believing her voice doesn't matter. These beliefs can manifest in adulthood, creating a cycle of unhealthy relationships, poor self-esteem, and emotional isolation. The first step in breaking these cycles is awareness. It's about recognizing the patterns that exist in your own family and understanding how they affect your life. Once you identify these toxic dynamics, it's essential to challenge them, even when it feels uncomfortable. The Stoics taught that we should not shy away from discomfort, but embrace it as a path to growth. It might feel unnatural at first to express emotions openly, but by doing so, we can redefine what emotional connection looks like for ourselves and our children. For example, consider a father who is never encouraged to talk about his emotions. If he realizes that his emotional reserve is hindering his relationship with his son, he can make a conscious effort to change. Instead of staying silent when he's frustrated, he might start to verbalize his feelings. I'm upset right now, and I need a moment to cool down. This simple act can have a profound impact on his son, who will grow up understanding that it's okay to express emotions, something that may have been foreign to him growing up. This is how legacies shift, by breaking the silence and changing the narrative. But awareness alone isn't enough. The next step is action. If we are to break these cycles, we must be intentional about the environment we create for those who come after us. A woman who grew up in a household where love was conditional, given only when she met certain expectations, might find herself unintentionally applying these same standards to her children. The way she speaks to them, the way she shows affection, even the way she disciplines them, could reflect the patterns she grew up with. The key to breaking this cycle is learning to love without conditions, to show affection even when it's inconvenient or hard. Breaking the cycle also involves confronting the uncomfortable truths about our upbringing. It might mean acknowledging the toxic behaviors or emotional manipulation we witnessed in our families. Confronting these truths isn't about blaming anyone, it's about understanding how these behaviors have affected us, and more importantly, how we can avoid repeating them. As the Stoics would say, we have the power to control our reactions and, by extension, our future actions. Is it easy to confront the painful aspects of family dynamics? Of course not. It's far easier to ignore the problem, to keep things the way they are. But ask yourself this: what kind of example do you want to set for future generations? Do you want to pass on the same patterns of emotional avoidance, manipulation, or lack of trust? Or do you want to break the cycle and leave a legacy of emotional honesty, respect, and understanding? The answer, while not always simple, is clear. We all want to leave a legacy that our children can build on, a healthier, more connected future. Breaking the cycle requires us to take a hard look at ourselves and ask tough questions. How have my past experiences shaped the way I interact with others? How am I unintentionally passing on these patterns to my children? What steps can I take today to break the cycle and create a healthier environment for future generations? These are the questions that can lead to profound change, not only in our own lives, but in the lives of those who come after us. As you reflect on this, remember that breaking the cycle isn't about being perfect. It's about being intentional. It's about making small, deliberate changes that over time will build a legacy of emotional health and strength. After all, we are not defined by our past, but by the choices we make in the present. So how will you choose to redefine your legacy? What actions can you take today to break the cycle and create a brighter future for those who will follow in your footsteps? Number 5. Taking action. Strengthening your mental and emotional boundaries. Taking action to strengthen your mental and emotional boundaries is crucial if you want to create healthier relationships, especially within the family. Without clear boundaries, we risk allowing ourselves to be consumed by the demands of others, leaving us drained, resentful, and sometimes even lost in the process. The importance of setting these boundaries cannot be overstated, as they allow us to preserve our sense of self and maintain balanced connections with those we love. Consider a man who finds himself constantly feeling overwhelmed by his family. His parents, while loving, often demand more of his time than he can give. His siblings, though well-meaning, don't respect his need for space, often calling him late at night with trivial matters. Over time, he feels like he's losing control, like he's giving away pieces of himself to everyone else. It's a common story. Familial love often comes with a silent expectation that we'll put others' needs before our own. But when we fail to establish clear boundaries, we allow that unspoken demand to control us. What happens when we neglect to take action? We end up feeling resentful, anxious, and emotionally exhausted. And that's where the power of boundaries comes into play. As Epictetus wisely said, wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. Boundaries help us clarify what we need and protect us from the demands that can overwhelm us. Emotional boundaries are not about shutting people out or building walls between us and those we love. Rather, they are about creating a healthy separation between our feelings and the feelings of others. By setting these boundaries, we ensure that we can be there for our family without losing ourselves in the process. It's about recognizing that while we may love and care deeply for those around us, we also need to honor our own emotional space and needs. The Stoics understood this principle well. They emphasized the importance of self-discipline, clarity of thought, and control over one's own emotions. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most famous Stoic philosophers, wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This insight highlights the fact that while we cannot control how others behave, we can control how we respond to them. Strengthening our mental and emotional boundaries allows us to maintain this sense of control and clarity in the face of external pressures. In a way, establishing boundaries is a Stoic practice. It's about choosing how much emotional energy we give to situations and others. But what does it actually look like to set these boundaries? It's not always easy, especially with family members who may not recognize or respect your needs. The first step is identifying where your boundaries need to be. Do you often feel overwhelmed by family demands? Are there certain behaviors that trigger feelings of resentment or stress? Acknowledging these feelings is the first step in strengthening your emotional boundaries. Next, take action to communicate your needs clearly and assertively. It's not enough to silently hope others will respect your boundaries. A woman, for instance, who feels overwhelmed by her mother's constant requests for help, might need to say, "I love you, and I want to support you, but I need time for myself. I can help you tomorrow, but I need to take care of my responsibilities today." This type of assertive communication not only establishes the boundary, but also maintains a sense of respect and understanding. It's not about rejecting the other person, but rather about rejecting the behavior that crosses the line. But what about those moments when you're afraid of disappointing someone, especially family? It's natural to fear conflict or feel guilty when setting boundaries, particularly when it comes to people you care about. However, remember that boundaries are not about being selfish, they are about protecting your emotional well-being. You can love someone deeply while still taking care of yourself. By taking action to strengthen your boundaries, you ensure that you are emotionally available for others in the long run. After all, you can't pour from an empty cup. As Seneca advises, no man is free who is not master of himself. Setting boundaries allows us to retain our freedom and emotional well-being. Sometimes setting boundaries means saying no, not just to others, but to yourself as well. For example, a man might realize he tends to overcommit, agreeing to family gatherings or obligations even when he's already exhausted. By setting a boundary with himself, he decides to limit how many commitments he takes on. This prevents burnout and allows him to be more present when he does engage with his family. The Stoic approach teaches us that self-control is essential for a well-lived life. In this context, it's about exercising control over how much emotional energy we give to others. So why does this matter? Because without boundaries, we risk becoming a passive participant in our own lives. When we fail to take control of our emotional space, we leave room for others to dictate how we feel and what we do. Establishing clear boundaries allows us to live authentically and to be true to ourselves while still loving and supporting those around us. The Stoics would remind us to remember that our peace of mind is within our control. We must choose to protect it, as it is integral to living well. You might be wondering, though, what if I set boundaries and people don't like it? The truth is, not everyone will respect your boundaries right away. Some family members might feel hurt or upset because they are used to things being a certain way. But that doesn't mean you should give in to their demands. Standing firm in your boundaries can lead to healthier, more respectful relationships over time. After all, if you don't set the boundaries now, the emotional strain will only grow, leading to resentment and frustration. Freedom is the only worthy goal in life, said Epictetus. Setting boundaries is a fundamental step toward that freedom. Think of it this way. If you continue to allow family members to overstep your boundaries, you're not doing anyone any favors. By taking action and reinforcing your emotional limits, you are teaching them how to treat you with respect. And in doing so, you set an example of emotional maturity and self-respect that can ultimately lead to more fulfilling and balanced relationships. As you reflect on this, ask yourself, when was the last time I truly honored my emotional boundaries? Are there areas in my life where I'm overextending myself or sacrificing my well-being for the sake of others? What action can I take today to strengthen my boundaries and ensure that I'm nurturing my emotional health while still maintaining strong relationships with my family? Remember, taking action to strengthen your mental and emotional boundaries isn't just about self-protection. It's about creating a space where love, respect, and emotional well-being can thrive. By setting clear boundaries, you're not only protecting yourself, but also creating healthier dynamics that benefit everyone. So, are you ready to take the next step in building stronger emotional boundaries for the sake of your peace of mind and your relationships? In this video, we've explored the essential lessons from Stoic philosophy that can help you identify and navigate toxic family relationships. By recognizing superficial connections, setting firm boundaries, and prioritizing emotional well-being, you can start to create a healthier and more balanced family dynamic. Remember, as Stoic philosophers like Marcus Aurelius and Seneca emphasized, the key to inner peace is mastering our reactions and protecting our mental space. Applying these Stoic principles consistently can transform your relationships and, more importantly, your life. Trust that by focusing on what you can control, your responses and boundaries, you are building a life that aligns with your values. It's not about severing ties with family, but about creating space for love and respect to thrive. So ask yourself, are there family dynamics that are draining you? What steps can you take today to set boundaries that protect your peace? The answers may not be easy, but they're worth seeking. I'd love to hear about your experiences. Have you ever had to navigate a difficult family relationship? How did Stoic teachings help you find clarity or peace? Share your thoughts and reflections in the comments below. If you found this video valuable, don't forget to like and subscribe to Stoic Narratives Official for more content on personal growth, Stoic philosophy, and how to live a life true to yourself. Stay strong and remember, your peace is worth the effort.